Hi, pardon my wet hair. It's COVID hair. I was like looking at numbers and I was like, oh no, I missed the deadline here.
No, you didn't. You're totally fine. No worries. It's good to see you, Mark. Thanks for spending a little time with us this afternoon. And by the way, I used to live in Miami. I used to live in Coconut Grove and work for WTVJ Channel 4. So Miami was my town for a little bit. But more importantly, Mark, what the heck is happening in Florida?
Well, one of the reasons I was late to this is I'm obsessing. We're like all of us who are like kind of like insiders and pay attention to stuff are obsessing about it because there was the 2:30 p.m. update that we got. So I'm looking kind of carefully at those numbers. We're trying to kind of weigh how we're looking at the ballot returns by party affiliation, which is not a perfect measurement. Like that counts the ballots. It doesn't actually count the votes. Like, so every
Right.
Republican ballot is getting logged as a Republican ballot. Every independent one is an independent. Every Democrat is a Democrat one. We don't know if the Democrat voted for Biden, if the Republican voted for Trump, or who the independent voted for. We have to kind of rely on polling and be careful of that.
Good bellwether, though, right, Mark?
What's that?
It's a pretty good indication, if not foolproof.
Right. Like generally, once you reach big data sets, like the Democrat, like all of the Democrats, you can basically say they're going to essentially balance out and vote for the Democrat, all the Republicans for the Republican. Now, if like Biden, the going theory, and I don't know how true it is, so beware, is that Biden is probably going to get more crossover Republican voters than Trump is going to get Democratic voters. If that's the case, it's obviously very good for Biden. And the polling seems to universally agree, even Republican polling, that Biden's winning independents. The question is how much?
Right.
You know, stop me if I get too in the weeds.
No, but tell us. Well, first of all, explain, Mark, what update you're looking at that you're trying to kind of analyze and interpret.
I'm looking at what we call the 2:30 p.m. update, because at 2:30 p.m. a lot of the counties report, hey, here's the total voters we've had who've showed up. And since I already have the list of the early in-person votes, the absentee ballot votes, already summed by party affiliation, we can then figure out, okay, what's election day turnout look like and what's total turnout, obviously. And based on that, we start making guesses as to like how the election is breaking. So what's it actually mean in real terms? Republicans just came out like they stormed the gates this morning in political terms, and they cast almost half of the ballots as of about noon. Compared to Democrats. So they were up quite a bit. Democrats are kind of clawing back. When you look at the entire electorate, both election day and pre-election day, that is early voting and absentee voting, Republicans have cast 2 percentage point more almost ballots than Democrats. And that's basically right at the break-even point for Biden if he is going to win independents by more than 5. If Biden's going to win independents more than 5, and if Republicans only cast 2 percentage point more ballots than Democrats, Biden's probably going to be president. Kind of all breaks down to that.
Okay, so help us understand the ifs and the likelihood. So you're a lot of ifs there.
Correct.
And I'm surprised to hear that Republicans cast as many early and mail-in votes, or you're saying 2% more than Democrats did?
Right. Well, I was talking about the total electorate, what we'll call the composition of the electorate, or the share of the vote. So as of 2:30 today, including both election day voting and pre-election day voting, a total of 10.4 million ballots have been cast. The Republican share of that is 39%. The Democratic share of that in Florida is 37.5%. The difference between those two numbers is 1.5 percentage points. And so we call that, kind of as insiders, we call that an R plus 1.5, or we kind of round up to R plus 2. Basically, an R plus 2 electorate, under our current assumptions, which can be wrong, an R plus 2 electorate is essentially the break-even point. If it goes above R plus 2, Trump is going to win Florida. If it goes below R plus 2, it becomes likelier and likelier that Biden wins Florida. But those likelihoods are based on assumptions about how independents vote, and we can only rely on polling for that. and the polling's kind of all over the map, although it does sort of universally agree that Biden is winning a higher share of the independents. The question is, what's the share?
Okay, and when will you know if that 1.5 or 2% goes up or down for the Republicans?
We'll know there's going to be a 5 p.m. update, so we'll be able to check it then. Polls close Eastern time, 7 p.m., but Florida has 2 time zones. So west of the Swanee River is the central time zone. Those will close at 8 p.m. So to kind of fast forward to answer your question, about 8:15 p.m., we'll have a great idea of who's on track to win Florida. Now, that's assuming we don't wind up in recount territory where the margin is less than half a point. And we could very well wind up there because we have a history of close elections. But there are things we don't know. We don't know if Biden is getting a bigger share of Republicans than Trump is getting Democrats. And we also just don't know how those independents are breaking. That's what the election's for, right?
Got it. And, you know, it's interesting. I was talking to Mike Murphy. I don't know, Mark, if you know Mike, but he's been involved in this Orange Crush effort along with Mike Bloomberg, I guess, trying to flip Florida. He seemed quite confident this morning. Now, this is the polls that Biden was going to win in Florida. And I'm curious what your reaction is to Mike Murphy's confidence.
Well, you know, Mike's been wrong before. We all have. Like, for instance, he in 2016 said that Donald Trump was a, quote, false zombie frontrunner and could never become the Republican Party nominee, let alone president. Well, look where we are today. Now, again, everyone's gone out ahead of their skis once in a while and gotten it wrong. There's a reason for Mike's optimism. Is since he was working with Bloomberg, Bloomberg's internal numbers showed that Biden might have been ahead in early vote, not ballots cast, but actual votes, according to their models, which isn't just polling. It's demographic profiles of these independents and Republican and Democratic voters. Biden might have been ahead by more than 450,000 votes on Election Day morning. That's a big margin, especially if, as we're kind of forecasting, only about 2 million more Floridians would be voting on Election Day. If 2 million people are voting on Election Day and the other candidate has to overcome a 400,000 ballot advantage of his opponent, that's difficult. So that's one of the reasons they were feeling good.
But having said that, Mark, it's my understanding that a lot of early voters and mail-in voters leaned heavily Democratic.
Right.
And that day of voters lean heavily, or people were thinking would lean heavily Republican. Correct.
Yeah, that's why the early vote share in the Bloomberg models, I think Hawkfish is the name of the data firm, they had Biden at an actual advantage of 400,000 votes, because of the in-person early vote and the absentee ballot mail-in votes. But that was Biden's advantage just heading into the election day. And the problem that there is for Trump is that you had 9 million early and absentee ballot votes cast. You might only wind up with 2.2 million Election Day ballots cast. So what would you rather do? Would you rather win a big share of the 9 million or a big share of the 2.2 million? You'd rather win a big share of that 9 million. And that appeared to be trending well for Biden. But then, Election Day starts, Republicans are casting half of the votes. That's blowing the doors off of the place. Now, that rate appears to have been slowed, but, last thing I like to do in Florida is forecast how the state's going to break. I survived the 2000 election recount in Palm Beach County, and a variety of other elections and electoral mishaps, controversies, recounts, and razor-thin election margins. So, I don't even feel comfortable saying it's going to be close. I kind of say it because that's how we default here, but who knows? Maybe one of these guys could win by, almost 3 points, which in Florida is like a landslide.
Well, let me ask you a question. I know that Florida started counting, Mark, the early voting and the mail-in ballots 10 days ago, right?
Right. Well, they've been counting there's a term of art here, counting ballots versus tabulating votes. So they've been taking the ballots and logging into the systems in the 67 election supervisor's office. Like, this is a Republican ballot, this is a Democratic ballot, blah, blah, blah. They haven't actually been tabulating the votes and loading them into the system. They're going to basically do that on election night. They'll flip that switch in all these election supervisors' offices, and then that number will pop up.
But I thought, you said by 8:15 or so, we'll know who won Florida. So when
we'll have a pretty good idea. Yeah.
Well, when are they going to start doing that? Because with 9 million early and mail-in votes, I mean, how are they going to tabulate them so quickly?
Well, they're already kind of loaded into the system. Literally, all they have to do is kind of hit a switch, and that can take place within a matter of minutes. And understand, this happens at 67 election supervisors' offices across the state. It's not done by one computer, it's done by 67 computers. And so that can be done pretty quickly. And I said 8 p.m. for a reason, because at 8 p.m., that's when the polls close in the Panhandle, the western Florida counties. Most of the Florida counties are on the East Coast. And so by 7:30, 7:45, most of Miami-Dade's, which is the largest county here, Broward County, second largest county, Palm Beach County, third largest county in Southeast Florida, most of those votes will, certainly the early votes, will be tabulated. So we'll have a great idea for like 75%, 80% of the vote. I must admit, I probably shouldn't say those percentages. A very large share of the vote will be tabulated before 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. It's just that after 8:15 p.m. or so, that gives a chance for the smaller northern panhandle counties to also report. And we'll just get a really good idea. But again, if it's close, yeah. I mean, it took us a few weeks. In 2018, we had 3 races that went to recounts: the governor's race, the Senate race, and the race for agriculture commissioner. It's, it's a state of close elections.
Yeah. Well, how is Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties? How are they looking?
That's a good question. Miami-Dade is, the largest county in the state, heavy in Democrats. Broward is the second biggest county. It's got a bigger kind of liberal population. One of the things that keeps Miami-Dade a little more Republican, but not much, is the high Cuban-American population there, and they tend to vote Republican. But Miami-Dade County has had some Democratic turnout problems relative to Republicans, and that's concerned Democrats, obviously. But Broward County might be picking up the slack because their voting has been gangbusters. Palm Beach has been pretty steady as well. So the Southeast Florida counties look like they're going to perform pretty well for the Democrat. But, that's only 3 of 67 counties. Yes, they're the 3 biggest ones, but there's a lot of other counties in Florida to watch. On the Republican side, Lee County is a big one. That's where Fort Myers is located. Collier's a little smaller, but also Collier has just really, really strong turnout so far. It's very Republican. Sarasota's a Republican county. It's a little more kind of more moderate Republican. Those are older Republican counties. Volusia County, which is where Daytona Beach is, that's also turned into a pretty strong Republican county as well. So we need to kind of look at those to start to balance out those big blue urban centers that you see, Palm Beach, Broward, Dade, Tampa, which is Hillsborough County, Duval County, which is Jacksonville. Used to be a pretty Republican place. Jacksonville's becoming much more Democratic, but the surrounding ring counties there are becoming a little more Republican. So there's this kind of constant yin and yang in Florida, where at a certain point you're like, oh, I may as well just look at all 67 counties before I can figure this out, right?
Yeah, Mike was saying that his Orange Crush effort was starting to mitigate some of the sort of Venezuelan and Cuban voters who, for whom the socialism message seemed to be resonating, by talking about President Trump's relationships with dictators like Putin and Kim Jong-il. Have you seen any kind of movement from Latino voters understanding they're not monolithic?
Right. Well, we've seen movement among Cuban Americans in polling from Bloomberg's, let's say, operation, and the one who's kind of been tasked with changing those Cuban votes, so to speak, or bringing some of them back into the Democratic fold is a pollster and consultant, Fernanda Mondi. And according to their polling, it's worked. The question is whether it was a little too late. They did a lot of very good ads. People I know I live in Miami, so I Cuban neighbors on both sides of me and across the street. They've talked to me about them. But that having been said, the one Cuban neighbor is voting for Biden. The other one's voting for Trump, and the other one said he's undecided. So, who knows? But it
Yeah.
appeared to be working. But one of the problems that the Biden campaign appeared to make was.
Whoops.
About that colleague was calling
Yeah.
in. I don't know if
That's
you can
okay.
hear me. Oh, you're back. Know where I cut off, but
Go ahead. What were you
there. Yeah, I think it was that the Biden campaign waited a long time, relatively speaking, to take the socialism attacks seriously. Now, one of the reasons they might have been doing that is they were looking at Florida and they weren't sure about playing in Florida because it's a big, expensive state. Bloomberg helped change the math by dumping as much, I think more than $100 million here, both on TV and ground game. And if that $100 million doesn't make Trump lose Florida, the effect it will have, likely, if the polling is right, is to have diverted Trump's attention and his money back to Trump's must-win state of Florida, freeing up Biden in those, so to speak, Rust Belt states, that what they called the blue wall states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan.
So maybe we can check in with you tonight at around 7:30 or so, Mark, and see what you're seeing.
I think that would be okay. I got to check with our scheduler because, I have I'm like a seasonal variety of beer, like Oktoberfest, right? I'm like the Sam ad. Like, people pay attention to what I have to say, like in October and November, and then I won't see it for 2 years,
Even if you can't do this, maybe I can text you and you can kind of give us some insight on what you're seeing. And but Mark, thank you very much for kind of giving us the update. It's interesting because you seem a lot more ambivalent than Mike Murphy did this morning.
Well, he's paid not to be ambivalent. My Twitter handle picture is Doubting Thomas putting his finger in the wound of Jesus. Like, I want the corporeal body in my hand before I could really tell you what it is. So that's probably the main difference between him and me, is like, I can't afford certainty, by just kind of guessing at things. I'm not saying he's wrong, but I'm certainly not saying he's right either. He's guessing.
Yeah. I hear you. Well, Mark, thanks a lot. It's great to meet you, and keep on crunching those numbers for us, okay?
Right. Thank you. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
If you guys like what you see, subscribe right here.